We've all heard of daring heists and high-stakes robberies. But what if the real masterminds weren't masked criminals, but the very employees hired to protect the businesses they betrayed? From a trusted bank worker leaking vault codes to a security guard who opened the doors for thieves. These are the shocking cases where insiders turned against their own companies, helping criminals pull off some of the most audacious robberies ever recorded. Some thought they were too smart to get caught. Others believed the perfect crime was within reach. But in the end, every betrayal comes at a price. This is 7 times employees helped criminals rob their own companies. The Inside Man. Employee leaks vault codes to bank robbers. In a seemingly secure financial institution, an unsuspecting bank was about to experience one of the most shocking betrayals in its history. The perpetrator wasn't an armed criminal storming the building, but rather someone who had sworn loyalty to the institution. A senior bank employee who had access to the inner workings of the vault security system. This individual, a longtime staff member trusted by both colleagues and superiors, had been harboring a secret financial struggle. Mounting debts, coupled with personal dissatisfaction, made him an easy target for manipulation. It all started when a group of criminals, scouting for vulnerabilities in financial institutions, identified the employee as a potential asset. They initially approached him under the guise of friendly acquaintances, subtly testing his willingness to share minor details about his job. Over time, the criminals built a rapport, pretending to offer financial advice and solutions to his money problems. As trust developed, they made their move, offering a substantial payout in exchange for classified access information to the bank's vault. The employee was hesitant at first, but eventually rationalized that the institution was insured and no one would really suffer from the loss. After months of planning, the scheme was set in motion. The employee, having been tasked with periodic security maintenance, had unrestricted access to override certain security protocols. He provided the criminals with precise knowledge of the vault's locking mechanisms, alarm schedules, and even the positioning of surveillance cameras. On the night of the heist, the criminals, dressed in inconspicuous clothing, entered the bank through a service entrance that had been discreetly left unlocked. Using the information provided, they bypassed several security layers and made their way to the vault. The timing was perfect. The heist took place during the night shift, when fewer employees were present, and the bank's security team was at its most relaxed. The employee had also ensured that surveillance footage of the vault's entrance would be conveniently corrupted, rendering the cameras useless at the critical moment. Within minutes, the criminals had emptied the vault, stuffing millions of dollars into large duffel bags before slipping away undetected. The entire operation had taken less than 30 minutes. The discovery of the robbery the next morning sent shockwaves through the institution. At first, investigators suspected an external breach, but inconsistencies in security logs quickly pointed toward an inside job. Authorities scrutinized employee records, searched for unusual financial transactions, and eventually uncovered evidence linking the employee to the criminals. His bank account showed a sudden influx of money, and phone records revealed late-night communications with known associates of organized crime. It wasn't long before law enforcement moved in, arresting both the employee and his accomplices. The stolen money was partially recovered, but a significant portion remained unaccounted for, likely funneled into offshore accounts. The employee, once a respected member of the institution, now faced years in prison for his role in orchestrating one of the most calculated betrayals in banking history. His actions not only led to severe financial repercussions for the institution, but also served as a stark reminder of how insider threats can be as dangerous as external ones. Warehouse heist, worker stages, fake break-in for loot. A well-respected logistics worker had spent years earning the trust of his employers, managing inventory for a large warehouse that stored high-value electronics, luxury goods, and imported merchandise. To his colleagues, he was just another diligent employee, clocking in daily without raising suspicion. However, behind closed doors, he was secretly plotting one of the most audacious warehouse robberies ever attempted, a heist that would see millions in goods vanish overnight. It all started when the worker realized just how loosely the security systems were monitored at the facility. Over time, he studied the security routines, noting which guards were inattentive, which cameras had blind spots, and how access logs were recorded. He understood that if a robbery appeared to be a forced entry rather than an inside job, investigators would initially look elsewhere for suspects. This was when he decided to orchestrate a fake break-in, disguising his involvement while reaping the rewards. To execute his plan, he reached out to a group of criminals willing to handle the physical side of the heist. He provided them with crucial information, such as which areas contained the most expensive items, how to disable motion detectors, and which loading docks were the least monitored. In return for his assistance, he was promised a share of the stolen goods, which could later be sold on the black market. On the night of the heist, the criminals arrived at the warehouse in a stolen truck, parking it near a designated loading bay that had been left unlocked. The worker had disabled key security alarms from within, ensuring that no immediate response would be triggered when the robbers entered. To make it look like a genuine break-in, they shattered a side window, creating an entry point that would mislead investigators. Inside, the criminals moved quickly, loading pallets of electronics and luxury goods into the truck. The entire operation took less than an hour, and by the time the morning shift arrived, the warehouse had been cleared of millions in inventory. A full-scale investigation was launched, with law enforcement initially suspecting an external theft. Security footage was reviewed, but conveniently critical footage had been corrupted, another detail the worker had planned in advance. For weeks, investigators struggled to find leads. However, inconsistencies in the worker's alibi eventually raised suspicions. Financial records showed unexplained transactions, and anonymous tips suggested that he had been living beyond his means. When police obtained a search warrant, they discovered hidden evidence linking him to the robbery, communications with the criminals, suspicious cash deposits, and even a few stolen items still in his possession. Under pressure, the worker confessed to his role in the heist, revealing how he had manipulated security protocols to stage the break-in. His arrest, along with those of his accomplices, brought an end to the elaborate scheme. The company suffered significant financial losses, while the worker, once seen as a loyal employee, was now facing a lengthy prison sentence. The heist served as a cautionary tale, highlighting the vulnerabilities that can arise when employees with inside knowledge turn against their own companies. Casino conspiracy, pit boss helps. Gang rig the system. Casinos are designed to be nearly impenetrable fortresses when it comes to cheating, with high-tech surveillance, strict security measures, and experienced staff trained to spot fraud. However, when the very people responsible for enforcing the rules decide to break them, even the most secure casinos become vulnerable. That's exactly what happened in this case, when a trusted pit boss orchestrated a scheme that allowed a group of criminals to walk away with millions without ever pulling a weapon. The pit boss had spent over a decade working in the casino industry, gaining intimate knowledge of its surveillance systems, dealer procedures, and how winnings were tracked. Over time, he became disillusioned with his job, feeling undervalued despite his high-ranking position. He also had a dangerous habit: gambling. His own financial struggles made him the perfect target for a criminal syndicate looking for an insider to manipulate the system. They approached him with an offer he couldn't refuse: use his position to help them cheat the casino, and in return, he would receive a percentage of their winnings. The scheme was complex but executed flawlessly. The criminals, posing as high rollers, were strategically seated at select tables where the pit boss had influence over the dealers. These dealers, unbeknownst to the casino, were either complicit in the crime or manipulated by the pit boss into making subtle mistakes. Card games like blackjack and baccarat were the primary targets, since slight adjustments in dealing patterns and hand signals could give the criminals an overwhelming advantage. One of the primary techniques involved false shuffling. The pit boss ensured that specific decks were pre-arranged so that the criminals knew exactly which cards were coming next. The dealers, under his instruction, would only pretend to shuffle, giving the criminals a major statistical advantage. In roulette, magnets and hidden signaling devices helped the group predict winning numbers. Additionally, fake payouts were processed for supposed lucky winners, individuals who never actually played but were cashing out thousands in fraudulent earnings. To cover their tracks, the pit boss manipulated security footage, ensuring that surveillance cameras missed key moments of cheating. He also altered logs to justify large payouts, making it seem like regular gameplay rather than an orchestrated con. For months, the casino hemorrhaged money without realizing it. The criminals withdrew their winnings gradually, ensuring that no single night raised suspicion. However, casinos employ some of the best fraud detection teams in the world, and eventually, anomalies in payout patterns triggered an internal audit. Investigators noticed that specific tables were experiencing an unusual number of high-value wins, and that these wins were connected to the same group of people. Once security personnel started closely monitoring the involved tables, they caught the pit boss making subtle hand gestures to the criminals, signaling valuable game information. It wasn't long before authorities intervened. The pit boss, along with the criminals, was arrested, and a full investigation revealed just how deeply the scheme had infiltrated the casino's security. The financial damage amounted to millions in fraudulent winnings, and the pit boss was sentenced to years in prison for his role in the conspiracy. His once respected career ended in disgrace, serving as a warning to others who might consider manipulating the system from within. Security betrayal. Guard disables alarms for midnight raid. Security guards are supposed to be the first line of defense against crime, entrusted with protecting businesses from break-ins and theft. But in this case, the very person hired to keep a facility safe was the one who made it most vulnerable. A security guard working for a high-end jewelry distribution center orchestrated a daring heist, allowing criminals to steal millions in luxury watches, diamonds, and rare gemstones, all while making it seem like a professional burglary rather than an inside job. The guard had been working at the facility for several years, gaining extensive knowledge of its security protocols. He knew exactly when security sweeps happened, which doors were reinforced, and most importantly, how the alarm system operated. Despite his steady job, he was deeply in debt due to a combination of poor financial decisions and gambling losses. His desperation made him an easy target for a criminal organization looking for an insider to bypass security at the jewelry center. The criminals approached him discreetly, offering him a cut of the profits in exchange for helping them get inside undetected. At first he hesitated, fearing the consequences, but the offer was too tempting to ignore. His share of the stolen goods would be worth more than a decade of his salary. He agreed, and together they formulated a plan. On the night of the heist, everything went according to schedule. The guard was on duty alone, ensuring that there were no additional witnesses. Just before the criminals arrived, he disabled the motion detectors and internal alarm sensors, making it seem like a routine system malfunction. He also ensured that security cameras in critical areas were accidentally turned away from the action, leaving key blind spots for the robbers to move through. The criminals arrived in an unmarked van and gained entry through a side door that the guard had discreetly left unlocked. Dressed in black with masks covering their faces, they moved with military-like precision, heading straight for the vault where the most valuable merchandise was stored. Thanks to the guard's inside knowledge, They knew which safes contained the highest value items and which ones were merely decoys. Within minutes, they had stuffed millions of dollars worth of jewelry into bags and loaded them into the van. Before leaving, they took extra steps to stage the scene, breaking a window and leaving behind tools to make it appear as if the robbery had been executed by skilled outsiders with no internal help. The entire heist took less than 20 minutes. When the morning shift arrived, they were greeted by chaos. Police were called immediately, and the investigation began. At first, detectives assumed it was a highly sophisticated gang that had found a way to bypass security until they reviewed the alarm logs. They noticed that the alarm had been manually deactivated just minutes before the break-in and that key cameras had been repositioned. Suspicion quickly fell on the only person present at the time, the security guard. Investigators dug deeper, discovering evidence that he had been communicating with known criminals in the weeks leading up to the heist. When they searched his home, they found stacks of cash hidden in different locations, his share of the stolen goods that had already been converted into money. Under pressure, he confessed, revealing the entire operation and leading police to the remaining criminals. The jewelry heist became a high-profile case, exposing how an insider with the right access could be more dangerous than even the most skilled burglars. The security company faced backlash for hiring someone who could be compromised so easily, and the facility was forced to implement stricter measures to prevent future betrayals. Meanwhile, the guard, once trusted to protect valuable assets, was sentenced to a long prison term, his life forever changed by the lure of easy money. Cyber heist, specialist hacks system for criminals. In the modern world, some of the biggest crimes aren't committed with guns or masks, but with keyboards and lines of code. This was the case when an IT specialist working for a multinational corporation secretly helped a group of cybercriminals steal millions by exploiting vulnerabilities in the company's internal financial systems. The IT specialist had been with the company for years, responsible for maintaining its servers, protecting against cyber threats, and ensuring that sensitive data remained secure. With his deep technical knowledge, he had access to crucial systems, including payroll, transaction processing, and security monitoring. What his employers didn't know was that he had a secret online gambling addiction, one that had drained his bank account and left him drowning in debt. Desperate for a way out, he was approached by a group of hackers who had been trying to breach the company's financial network but couldn't get past its security measures. They needed an insider, and he was the perfect target. At first, the IT specialist resisted, but the criminals made an irresistible offer. If he helped them gain access to the financial system, he would receive a significant percentage of the stolen money, more than enough to clear his debts and secure his future. After some hesitation, he agreed, setting into motion one of the most sophisticated corporate cyber heists ever recorded. The plan was executed in phases. First, the IT specialist created a hidden backdoor within the company's network, allowing the hackers to access internal systems undetected. He then helped them bypass multi-factor authentication protocols by supplying them with administrator credentials, which he had access to as part of his job. Once inside, the hackers carefully manipulated financial records, siphoning small amounts of money from thousands of transactions and rerouting them into offshore accounts. To avoid raising suspicion, the criminals spread the theft over several weeks, ensuring that no single transaction appeared large enough to trigger an alert. Meanwhile, the IT specialist covered their tracks by modifying system logs, erasing evidence of unauthorized access, and making it seem like routine financial operations. For a while, everything worked perfectly. Millions of dollars were being funneled into secret accounts, and the company remained unaware that anything was wrong. However, as the stolen funds grew, so did the risk. An internal audit flagged discrepancies in transaction reports, showing money disappearing in ways that couldn't be explained. Suspicious, the company brought in external cybersecurity experts to investigate. The moment they started analyzing network activity, red flags appeared. They discovered unauthorized access points within the system, all traced back to an internal source. The IT specialist, who had taken great care to cover his tracks, had made one critical mistake. One of his hidden scripts had been left running, creating a digital footprint that led directly to his workstation. Law enforcement was brought in, and after a detailed forensic analysis, they uncovered his communications with the hackers, financial records showing unexpected deposits in his account, and deleted logs that could be reconstructed. When confronted with the overwhelming evidence, he had no choice but to confess. The cyber heist had cost the company millions, and while some of the stolen funds were recovered, much of it had already been transferred through multiple international accounts, making full recovery impossible. The IT specialist, once seen as a brilliant and trusted employee, was sentenced to prison, while the hackers he worked with were eventually tracked down and arrested. The case served as a wake-up call for corporations worldwide, highlighting the dangers of insider cyber threats and reinforcing the need for stricter security measures. Despite the sophistication of the crime, it was ultimately undone by a single mistake, a reminder that even the best-laid cyber heists leave a trail behind. Armored truck. Double cross. Driver hands over the cash. For years, armored trucks have been considered one of the most secure ways to transport large sums of money, with strict protocols, armed guards, and GPS tracking to prevent theft. But when an insider, someone with direct access to the money, decides to betray the system, even the most protected cash shipments can vanish without a trace. That's exactly what happened in this case when an armored truck driver, entrusted with transporting millions, orchestrated one of the most daring thefts in the industry's history. The driver had been with the armored transport company for several years, earning the trust of his colleagues and superiors. He was seen as reliable and disciplined, the kind of employee who never cut corners and followed every security protocol to the letter. However, behind this reputation, he was dealing with severe financial struggles, an expensive divorce, mounting debts, and a gambling addiction that had drained his savings. Desperate for a way out, he started considering the unthinkable, stealing the very money he was responsible for protecting. Unlike most armored truck heists, which involve violent armed robberies, this scheme required no weapons or force, just precise timing, planning, and trust. Knowing that security procedures were designed to prevent outside threats rather than internal betrayals, the driver devised a plan to make the theft look like a random hijacking rather than an inside job. His opportunity came when he was assigned to a high-value cash pickup route, transporting money from several retail stores and banks to a secure facility. Normally, he worked with a partner, but on this particular day, he manipulated the schedule to ensure that he was driving solo for a portion of the route, a minor operational oversight that seemed insignificant at the time. When he reached a prearranged drop-off location, instead of following the route to the designated security depot, he pulled into an isolated parking lot where a stolen vehicle was waiting. His accomplices, a group of criminals he had secretly partnered with, were already there. Without hesitation, he opened the truck's rear doors, allowing them to load duffel bags full of cash into the waiting car. To make the robbery appear legitimate, the criminals then zip-tied his hands and ankles, gagged him, and placed him inside the back of the truck before fleeing with the money. Hours later, he was found by police, still bound but otherwise unharmed, claiming that he had been ambushed by armed robbers who had forced their way inside the vehicle. Investigators initially believed his story, as everything appeared to match the profile of a typical armored truck heist. However, small inconsistencies began raising suspicion. For one, there were no signs of forced entry. The truck's locks showed no evidence of tampering, suggesting that the robbers had been let in willingly. Security footage from nearby businesses also failed to capture any sign of an ambush, just the truck pulling into the lot and sitting idle for several minutes before the criminals drove off. But the biggest red flag was the driver's behavior. Despite claiming to have been held at gunpoint, he showed no signs of distress during questioning. Investigators decided to dig deeper, reviewing his phone records and financial history. That's when they discovered encrypted messages between him and his accomplices, as well as evidence of large cash deposits in offshore accounts shortly after the heist. Confronted with overwhelming proof, the driver eventually cracked, admitting that he had staged the entire event. The stolen money, amounting to millions, was partially recovered, but a significant portion remained unaccounted for, likely hidden away for future use. The driver and his accomplices were arrested and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The case sent shockwaves through the armored transport industry, leading to stricter security measures and new protocols to prevent similar insider betrayals. Despite the meticulous planning, the scheme ultimately failed due to a single flaw: trust. The very system that had allowed the driver to execute his plan also ensured his downfall, proving that even the most well-planned heists can unravel when investigators start asking the right questions.